Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gospel Tech Podcast. My name is Nathan Sutherland, and this podcast is dedicated to helping families love God and use tech. Today, we are continuing our conversation talking with teens directly about topics that are pertinent to them, and we are going to be talking today about dating. What is this concept of dating? How should we do this as Christians, and where does it lead us? Those are the three guiding questions, but I don't want to come down with an overly simplistic answer. What I do want to give is some practical guidelines for dating well in a digital world and really walking through the new experiences you have. Because even now, when I received dating advice, it was very timely and it was very culturally relevant in that era and time. Before smartphones, before ubiquitous internet, before Wi-Fi. That makes me basically a dinosaur when it comes to dating. And yes, I know there's entire songs about how breaking up was easier when I was growing up. I might have a word on that too. But the point is, there are still foundational truths because they're true for humans, and they're true because God made us this way. So let's get into what this looks like in terms of dating. As far as when to begin dating, I hate to break it to you, but basically every interaction is going to be some form of dating. The entire premise of dating is for you to build relational connections with someone of the opposite sex, so that when you begin to become interested in the opposite sex, you begin to know, here's how I relate with them. Here is how I'm respectful to them. Here is what I'm looking for in someone else to be in this journey with me along all of life. So let's look at where dating's supposed to go. Dating is supposed to be for marriage, not as a pastime for just what to do because we're bored, not as a way to fill a gap in your own character or your own personal wellness or wholeness. It is not two parts of a half becoming a whole. In fact, Jesus reminds us that the promise of marriage is that for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one. And he says, for this reason, they are one flesh. He actually goes on to say, this is why Jesus is like, divorce is not God's design. It happens. God allows it because we are broken and sinful, but it isn't what he wants for us. He goes, those two people are now one before God. It's a metaphor for what we become in God for all eternity. Marriage is not a permanent thing. Marriage is for this life. It's temporary. We produce children. All of these help us understand God and his nature and his character better, both through the symbols, the metaphors, and the actual experience of marriage and child rearing and parenting. But it's temporary. It goes away. And eventually the church as a whole is married to Christ. Revelation 19 is where the church is represented as the bride of Christ. And then Revelation 21 is where he says, I've done it. I've won. Christ had come back as a victorious warrior on a horse. He judges the earth. He defeats Satan. In Revelation 21, he's wiped away every tear. He's done it. And that becomes the truer version of what marriage represents. So if that's our eventual picture, if marriage is just an option, it's not everyone's called to it. In fact, Jesus says after the divorce piece, his disciples are like, whoa, we didn't realize marriage was so permanent. Like, maybe you're better off staying single. Jesus goes, yeah. And people that can understand that it's given to them by God to feel peace with that should act on it. So let's address this. Not everyone has to get married, which means not everyone has to go about dating. But remember, those interactions you are dating, whether or not you chose to be part of it. Someone's gauging you and being like, oh, I don't know. Should I not? Am I interested? What's this doing? And there's lots of emotional, social, and personal growth in this. It's just the way your body's going to react. At some point, as a boy, you're going to recognize there are girls. As a girl, you're going to recognize there are boys. And that is going to be an aha moment. My youngest child, 5 years old, does not recognize that difference right now. Wants to know categories like boys, girls. Helpful. Putting everything into categories, but plays with both groups the same. But then you translate into junior high and then into high school, and there's an awkward shift. Young people, we don't recognize that when we went through it. Or adults, we didn't recognize it when we were young people. Young people, you may not recognize it when you're there. As adults, we can watch it. We can watch like 4th grade, fine. 5th grade, fine. 6th grade, things just got awkward, right? It changes. Your brain develops part of puberty, you start to recognize, wow, I find this person interesting in new ways. And it's not explicitly sexual, by the way. We're not getting weird with it. It just, there are new emotions involved, and you have to figure out, like, what was that? Like, we've been friends for a long time, but this, like, sweaty palms, like, tongue is 10 times too big in my mouth. My whole mouth just went dry. Like, those things are natural reactions. That's part of that's the dating process. So we in America like to have a very formal dating process. We are dating one another, and this is, a social norm that you may not date other people, and it's not written anywhere, and the rules kind of change. But the basic premise is dating is the premise for marriage. The marriage that we have in the Bible is not the way we do it. It was arranged. And there was a lot of downsides from it, like a lot of the things that were normal in Bible times that Jesus didn't take up one by one, but he broke down systematically with his kingdom coming, where he goes, everyone is a sinner before God and is only saved by grace. You just destroyed most social castes in that single stroke, right? Similarly, the way marriage was done was a broken system. We're still broken. We're not doing great picking ourselves, by the way, but there is the opportunity to pick. The dating is real. So then what should we focus on when we're dating, with the idea of some of us are called to marriage and some of us are called to singleness? Those who are called to singleness, you're going to live in the light of God, him bringing you joy and wholeness and spiritual children in droves. All of the single adults I know are doing amazing missional work when they love Jesus first and then live out of that. Not all of them have complete contentment in their situation. They have some questions for God, but they are doing amazing missional work. Their families are huge in the spiritual children they're bringing in. An example, by the way, that we have from the Bible of Paul talking about his spiritual children. These people he has led to Christ and know the gospel because of the work he has done. That's an example of a single individual who can then go into the world and love people wholly from being fully committed to Christ. That's a beautiful thing. That is completely biblical and awesome. Just know, that's one side. The other side is you will be called to meet someone else and then do this dating to marriage to producing humans thing that is also a metaphor for complete commitment to Christ, because it's a temporary situation. So then now, how do we date? The basic idea in dating is you're getting to know yourself and you're getting to know another self, someone else who's made in God's image, who has equal value and who has equal say in this relationship. In that relationship growing process, there's really 5 parts of this individual you need to know. One of them is reserved, not on the table right now. Here's the 5. You are going to get to know this person intellectually and emotionally and socially and spiritually. And then there's intimately, physically, you're going to get to know them. But that intimacy physical part is reserved for marriage specifically. And I'll get to anyway, we'll get to why that's true. But the short reason actually on the intimacy part is when intimacy enters the room, physical intimacy enters the room, everything else tends to go sideways, especially if it comes before the other 4 are established. This is based in research where you talk about relationships, there's actually a study done in Washington State at a university where they basically put a woman in a room facing away from the door. They put a boy, a college age man, 17 to 20-ish, in the room. Lights flick on, lights flick off, exit the room. What'd you see? And the woman facing the wall was fully clothed, facing the wall, but had a skirt on. And the skirt slowly was brought higher and higher up her legs. Facing away from the person, no eye contact was made, and it was just a few seconds of light on. And the higher the skirt was, the less the young man saw in the room. That's going to be our metaphor for this picture, that bringing intimacy into a relationship too quick can actually cost us some of the amazing things that are supposed to be there in intimacy and relationship and marriage. So intellectually, meaning you need to know this individual that works well. And by the way, that example was only boys for a girl, but that still works for girls too. It's not like girls are perfectly relational now that sex is in the room. It's an impactful experience for both sides, and it's meant to be done well as a metaphor for 2 becoming one flesh, that it's done in a covenant. We'll come back to that. I just wanted to make sure sometimes I talk too hard to the boys about lust and sexual agendas in relationships, But they're not the only ones who wrestle with that. So intellectually means we're getting to know the mind that God has given this individual. These are eternal people, eternal, right? Yes, not infinite, but eternal. They're not going to die. Their bodies will fall away. They will cross over. They will still have a mind. They will still have the personality. You will recognize this individual because the amazing person God has made, him or her. That is what you were looking to get to know. Involves their personality, involves the things that interest them, the things that cause awe and make them ask questions. Figure out those questions because those are the things you're going to be falling more in love with for the next decades of life. I'm more in love with my wife now than when I met her because I've continued to fall in love with all of those incredible things. And guess what? Some of the interests change, but the intellect does not. She puts that same sharp tack of a mind to whatever she goes after now. And it's the same mind that was fascinated by basketball in high school and college, and that was fascinated by education for an entire decade of her life and being a teacher. She's still there. The trappings just change. Similar with emotionally. You want to know this person. How do they process? What do they wrestle with emotionally? Some of us don't do great at showing our emotions. Some of us, we're just all emotions, and we don't do great at focusing our emotions. That's part of what makes that person unique. You're going to want to process that. And those things that are adorable and cute when you're dating, because they're fresh and they're new, will become tics that drive you mad at some point. Just know that. It's not bad. It's just human. That is what you're doing. You are a broken, fallible human who is now committing in a covenant to a broken, fallible human, not to fulfill one another, but to love one another. When we talk about loving, we are talking about choosing the highest good for the other person. And that is only possible truly when Christ is there. Some people do a beautiful job of it, pursuing the light they have. They don't know the name of Jesus yet, but they are loving and serving and looking for the other's goods first. Let's keep that in mind. Then there's socially. You want to know how this person interacts in groups, interacts interpersonally, the conversational piece, the relational social hangout piece. Like, let's go do stuff. Amazing in dating. So go do go-karts and rock climbing and snowboarding. Sure, go see a movie, but don't let movies be the only thing you have, mostly because dark rooms and lots of time together give more space for number 5 than they do for anything else. So very little chance you're going to get to know that person intellectually if all you do is sit in a dark room watching other people live their lives. But socially, get out and have activities together. In these cases, by the way, all 3 of these, you can do with someone you don't marry. In fact, the people that I dated and went to proms with and went on these activities and hung out with in college, sure, there was dating involved, even if there was no label, but we're still just friends. Like, I can meet them. I can shake hands with their husbands and look them in the eye. That's a good test for whether or not you did it right. Spiritually, yes. Pray together. Be a part of spiritual development and formation. Pray separately. That is not only something married couples do, but it is an intimate thing. And I wouldn't start like date number 1 maybe with a Bible study. And then physically. All right, I promise this. Physically comes in late. When we talk about this, how do you know you're ready for physical intimacy? First is, do you know the person? The other 4, when sex enters the room, everything else goes out the window. So that's first. Do you know the other 4? You're like, sure, I do. Do you love them? Meaning you're choosing the highest good. Jesus says the greatest love is to give up one's life for a friend. And we agree with that. Like, oh, it's true. I would die for you. I love you so much. Romeo and Juliet. But we're not willing to suffer lower levels of death. Like, I would never ask you to send me something that is sexually illicit or explicit. I would respect our commitment to stay before God right prior to our covenant. I would go without sex for you. Right? Like, maybe I would commit to not lust after the images of others or their videos. Right? Like, many of us are not willing to do those deaths, but I would die for you. We need to know, do we love this person? Not just do we feel passionately. Do we choose the highest good? It's a choice. Love is not a feeling, it's a choice. Do we choose the highest good for the other person? As Paul says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church and gave up his life for her. Are you ready to provide? That would be like, well, I'm ready to get married. Sure, maybe. Can you provide? It's an important part of being married because you're leaving and cleaving. And 5, are you committed before God? This covenant piece is public. It's public before God. You are committing, the 2 of you. It's not just, I've committed in my heart. Let's go be intimate. Nope. That's not the way it works. I'm committing before family and friends, before God and these witnesses, that this individual has my covenant, like God gave a covenant to Adam and Eve in Genesis 3:15. Like God gave a covenant to Abraham, in Genesis 15:5, said, look at the stars, I'm going to do it. When he gave a covenant to Abraham in Genesis 15:11, when he makes a formal promise, walks through the sacrificed animals himself and says, so be it to me, if I do not bring what I've said. In Isaiah 9, when he says, a king is coming, the zeal of the Lord is going to accomplish it. These are covenants, they're unilateral. They can be kept by just one part of that party. It's a huge deal. It must be done in public. It must be done with people in the room. The two people getting married, the people that support them, there's a physical giving of the woman from her family, a physical taking of her in to the man's family, and then a physical sending off of that man with his wife as a new family unit. It's a big deal. It does need to actually happen with an actual marriage, not just a verbal commitment and a heart promise. Now let's go do this thing. Without getting too far down that, keep in mind that dating needs to line up with all the stuff God calls us to. And I'll give you 3. 1 Corinthians 6:12, where it says, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. It is certainly an okay thing to do in Christ, but you're not allowed to just do anything. It has to line up with who God's called you to be. So we look at things like Philippians 4. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing, fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think on these things. Dating can be that. It can be all of that beautifully and perfectly, and it can be horrific when we do it in the wrong order. Reflect on that. Look at it. If you don't know how it's going, Galatians 5:22 and 23. Does this relationship produce love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and gentleness and faithfulness and self-control? Self-control. If you can't wait on number 5, intimacy, you don't got it, and it's not loving. And I'm not saying you got to break up, but I'm saying you're headed a bad direction. You're building this relationship on a bad foundation. There are adults who've done it. They have to repent, and it describes their journey. It doesn't define it, but it's a hard road to pick. And there are absolutely pieces 20 years down the line that you will still be dealing with if that's the road you choose. God can redeem it. He can bless it. He can use it. And he's called you a specific way. Faithfully follow that. Date well. Date in life, middle school, high school, wherever your family has decided is appropriate for you. But know that all those interactions are some kind of gauging and dating, and that you need to be building the whole person in your view prayerfully before the Lord to ask, is this something you've called me to? Or is this singleness something you've called me to? And either way, you can glorify God because it's a temporary process. It's a glorious one, but it's temporary, and we are called to be faithful in doing it in the right direction. I hope this was encouraging. I know it was fast. There are so many other directions I wanted to take it, but I hope it's encouraging to equip you to begin taking some steps to love people now. You can love in these ways without ever having to marry the person and without any regrets being on the table. If you have any questions, write me, Nathan@gospeltech.net. And if this would help someone, would you please pass it along? And then join us next week as we continue this conversation about how we can love God and use tech.